in and out of a computer. So the senior consultant put his card in at the start of the day and left the day. Reception got to hear about that and stole a pop star's records and sold them to the newspapers. Yeah, and I could give you loads of examples. It was disaster waiting to happen.
Actually, I meant our case.
I've done scaffolding, right? But I'll make the point as it stands. What we did instead is we said the principal actants of physical things and roles, the principal interaction is the patient record. So what we'll do is we'll change those progressively. And then as things emerge, because we're monitoring it, we'll actually further automate. Yeah? Now, as I said yesterday, that's the way you do organisational change. What we just talked about is you're doing lots of little things to change the interactions between actants, yeah? And to change the substrate so it's more favourable to what you want. You're seeing what works and doesn't work, and then you're responding to that. So you're gradually aligning the system around a new purpose, yeah? Rather than trying to drive it top down. You're building it bottom up.
Okay, we have prepared a second case, and since you didn't read the brief anyways, we changed it. Swan, can you come up here?
Yeah, okay. So this is a case...
On camera, you need to be on that
Oh,
chair.
I need to be... Oh my goodness. All right. Okay, so this is a case is a company that provides online services, matching jobs mostly. And this is a case that would be interesting because they have a defined outcome. They want support for an IT change project, changing an internal major platform, harmonizing it across various countries. And they want support in change management. And of course the goal is to make sure that the whole transition runs smoothly, that everybody's using the platform properly, and that it's going to generate more innovation and savings and better market readiness and all of those kinds of things. And so the request was, or the RFP that we got was to design a proposal what we would do in order to help support the change management function, which included stakeholder engagement, which included communications, included clear change purpose and vision, pretty much the standard stuff. And so it would be very interesting to see whether you would even take up such a proposal.
Have they already designed the IT system? Is that given or not?
I think it's a standard application, right?
I'm not sure. They did not include any information about the IT system.
Let's assume it's a standard application.
Let's go through two options. One it isn't and one it
Okay.
is. Right? If you can still influence the IT design, then that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me draw a matrix.
Okay.
This is actually the design thinking stuff,
Yeah.
which you wanted as well.
Oh yes. Great. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay. So, what I want to look at is, and this is a 2x2 matrix, which is nice because people like 2x2 matrices. Yeah? And what I want to look at is discovery against ideation. Alright, so how do I discover things and how do I create ideas for change? Yeah? And this is expert, distributed.
You know what ideation is?
Ideas generation. Yeah?
Can you say ideation, please?
Ideation is ideas generation. Yeah, so it's a general, that's what it means, right? So I'm actually using a day of terms here. Yeah, so this is coming from the double diamond, right?
Yeah, it is.
So the double diamond actually works here. Because the experts do the interview, the discovery, they hold a design workshop, they generate their ideas. Life is wonderful. And I've sat through these with John C.D. Brown and we caused a rebellion on day one.
So double diamond is a term from design thinking.
That's straight from design thinking, right? So it's discover the stuff, iterate it, come up with it. It's reasonably good for certain types of standard product. Doesn't work for services or social change. Yeah? And then moving to another thing, and this is unarticulated need mapping.
Unarticulated Needs ist was so unter der Oberfläche nicht gesagt wird.
Unausgesprochene Bedürfnisse.
So needs people have, but they don't tell you about them.
Yeah.
Now actually in modern IT, this is the biggest area. Because people don't know what IT can do.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't know what to ask for.
Yeah.
And Apple's genius is they never develop what users say they want. They develop things that once users have them, they can't do without. Right? And that's the high margin. Right? Now this is really important because if you've got a big IT program, you want to find the unarticulated needs of the current user base.
The same is true for negotiation.
Yeah, same true for negotiation. I mean, this is the secret on negotiation is get as many bloody things as you can on the table and see what really matters. Yeah? I've done enough of that over the year, right? You want to find the things which won't cost you anything to do, but are huge value to the client. Yeah. Now, this is really important because I guarantee you, if they'd done a conventional design, they wouldn't have got this. But these are the micro frustrations of people's day-to-day lives. Yeah, and if you can address those, you've got a much more healthy IT system. Yeah, or you can deal with So this is really important. If we're working now, one of the things we now do in the Agile community, one of the Agile methods, right, is you gather this stuff continuously. And again, that's sensemaker, right? That's the operational stuff. You can look at statistical patterns, so you capture people's stories. You give them a system, say anything which frustrates you, tell a story. Any idea you've got, tell a story. Anything where you think, oh my God, if there was magic and it could do this, write it down. In fact, we have a magic box. And then we look at patterns in that and we give it to IT people and say, can you do something for this? Right? That starts to make IT strategic, i.e. small changes and switches. But in a large implementation, it's even more important because it can radically reduce the cost of implementation of a new system. Yeah? And if you've already designed it, I still get this. Because then you can say, are any of these going to be easier as a result of the new system, or can we think about training or implementation? Yeah? The other thing you also look at on this is what we call the 80-20 rule. And I summarize this as, sorry, I'll have to explain this, but I'll say it first. People are objects too. So a key thing on IT development is object-oriented programming. So an object is a discrete unit, and this is not the same as microservices, by the way. An object is a discrete group of code which has standard input-output. Yeah? That actually allows you to build systems, at scale, because all you have to do is maintain the objects in the object libraries. Yeah? And you know that if I put this into it, this will come out of it. So it's like a constructor. Yeah? And they also have two other features. They inherit. So you can have objects which inherit from higher level objects. And they can also be polymorphic, which means they're the same thing, but they look different. So like different types of watch faces, they're all the same thing, but they look radically different. Yeah? So one of the things we're now seeing in IT design is people, or other teams of people, are actually software objects. You can create a team with a standard input-output which interacts with software, so that actually human beings engage in the system much faster, but on a role base. And actually, if you look in most IT automation, particularly call centres, where I've done a lot of work, 80% of the grief comes from 20% of the problems. And those problems can be better handled by people. The trouble is, if you use an automatic system these days, you have to get very clever at gaming the system to trigger it to give you a human being. Yeah? So one of the things we also say in IT rollout is you better gradually migrating people objects to software objects as you prove what they need to do.
To software objects?
Yeah, so as a people object, as the input-outputs become stable, you can see how they work, you can see the rules, then you can make them a software object. But you don't make everything software up front. Yeah, got the principle? Yeah.
Are you saying, are you saying that the things that people do become part of the software architecture and design?
Absolutely.
Aha,
Right, so you treat people as objects.
okay.
And that's where we get into roles and teams rather than individuals. Now, to give an example of the benefit of this, I did field ethnography with Thames Water. Right? Yes, before they got into the trouble they are, right? And it's actually an interesting case. I mean, it's a good example of narrative. So actually, they cleaned up the River Thames. Yeah, and then now they've made it dirt again, but they did make it clean, right? Because when I was young, if you fell into the Thames, it was probably better to drown than go through the agony of chemical poisoning over the next 3 months, right? So they cleaned up the Thames, and because they're water scientists, they announced how clean the Thames was by saying they only had 1 part of cadmium per 20 trillion. Yeah, headline in the Sun the next day, cancer-causing chemical found in River Thames. So they argued against it scientifically, it didn't work, and I was doing strategy with them in Reading. And I feel slightly guilty about this. I said, what you really want is for somebody to catch a salmon in the upper reaches of the Thames. Because everybody knows that salmon only swim in clean water. And next week, they caught a salmon at Lechlade. And to this day, I'm convinced they planted it, right? But it showed it was story against fact. You don't fight a story with story, which actually in the first case is key. You want executives to have stories they can use to counter negative stories, not to argue against it logically. Yeah, real stories to match real stories and that's an additional benefit to sell the executives of the program. So either way, I spent a week with the water engineers, which has its own stories. Yeah. Including layers of decomposing women's bras in stock pots in High Street in Oxford.
No, we don't need that.
Go and do field ethnography. You find some. They all still use dowsing rods, by the way. Find water bugs. Yeah. But the week in the call centre was fascinating because I asked to work with the best performer and the worst performer. And by the way, doing a week's ethnography is much more effective than consultancy interviewing. You go in and you say, I want to be the trainee for a week. So I'm not going to interview people in the corner centre, I'm going to be trained by the best performer and the worst performer. Right? And they kept the worst performer on because they weren't going to fire him. So I spent a week with the best performer. It was really boring. Yeah, she followed the script. She always followed the script. She actually had a voice which any male would turn over in a day. And they interview people over the phone. Yeah, so she had a hugely convincing voice. She was highly successful. Yeah, and then I had the worst performer, and I went to get her a cup of tea and came back. And as I came back, I sat down, put the headphones on, and she just, when I left, she'd been talking with a guy in Esher in Surrey, who was complaining about the water supply to his second swimming pool. Right? And she'd spoken in a relatively posh voice. Right? As I went away, as I came back, I discovered and I could see from the numbers, she was talking to somebody in Tower Hamlets. Okay, Tower Hamlets is one of the worst slums in Europe.
Okay.
It really is terrible, all right, in many ways. It's a disgrace. And she said, in a completely different accent, she said, look, love, shoving your own shit up the tap won't get you rehoused. Why don't you phone this number? And I said, what? So I said to her, what was that? She said, oh, she phoned up to report water contamination. But I know there's a rumour going around that if your water is contaminated, they have to rehouse you. So people are that desperate, they're literally smearing shit into their taps. Calling the water contamination incident, at which point the water engineer goes out, they know what's happened, they have to call social services, they have to call the police. It costs about £30,000. And she said, so I've got this little black book of local support people to help. And she was not following the process, and she wasn't doing it in the time they were about to fire her, but she was saving them money every call because she was married to a water engineer. So she heard all the stories. So there was one solution, which was a Korean-style mass wedding. On the basis all the call centre staff were female and all the water engineers were male at that time. But what we actually did is we actually could then justify sending call centre staff onto a week with an engineer once a year. Right? And we also broke the process rules on and actually said we'll actually measure you on whether you resolve the problem at low cost, not if you follow a process. Yeah? Now that's an example of this sort of thing. There are some things human beings do much better than computers always will, particularly making unexpected connections. Remember I talked about adaptive thinking? Computers don't do that. Yeah? And how many times have you phoned a call centre and you're on an automatic thing? And we have a thing in Britain, right? The BT line. We all know when the Irish call centre is on because you want to phone them, not the Indian call centre, because the Irish call centre understand what you're talking about.
But you wouldn't understand the Irish, so.
Sure you will.
I have relatives in Monaghan.
Case, maybe.
Okay, so
We close the case.
sorry about that. You remember it because of the stories, right? So this is
I will remember the story, that's for sure.
this is really important. So you can actually go in now and say, look, we'll do this regardless of where the system is, because this will give us points where we can make a difference, and also very quickly identify where there are things that the new system may cause more problems.
Yeah.
Because the other thing will happen is people have already found the workarounds on the old system. They've got to find the workarounds on the new system. Yeah. So the other thing I do there is I create a lessons learned database, which is narrative again. So every time somebody finds something and solves a problem, they store it as a narrative. Because then that can be searched and looked at. So that's the sort of parallel process. Yeah? This one here is distributed ideation. So here you're finding the problems and you're giving them to the experts to solve. Here the experts are defining the problem and distributing it to the population to solve. We talked about that in the last case. Yeah? So basically we know this is the problem, but we know lots of people can come up with solutions. We want to find the 17%.
Again, what is a distributed?
Distributed ideation.
Ideation.
Yeah.
No, and the right down.
Yeah.
This one?
Sorry, I'm dyslexic, all right? If all the letters...
No, it's okay, I'm just quite far away.
Okay, and this is accepted.
Remember, accepted.
Remember the Phillips lighting case? That's where I'm putting unarticulated needs together with distributed capabilities in order to find novel solutions very quickly. And that was the Phillips lighting case. Right? So the design thinking approach says you do all four of those. There's nothing wrong with the DAO, but it only works in that very constricted case. Yeah?
I don't agree, but that's okay.
But now we have designed, it looks to me a little bit like software engineering. Let's assume it is a standard system. I mean, that case, right?
Yeah.
We were asked not to design the system, guys. We are not asked to design the system. We are asked to accompany the process.
I'm actually talking about that as
Okay.
well. Right? So I'm saying by mapping these, you can identify the weak and strong points. By setting this up as solutions, as problems occur, you can involve the whole workforce in finding the workarounds. Because actually, when new systems go in, the informal networks generally help people find solutions, so you formalise that interaction. Yeah?
So actually what this could be is it actually bridges the technical development and the change management function as one that is just about communication and training and telling stakeholders to model the
That's
way.
It entangles the two.
Yes.
Rather than being in a linear process, we've got the system, you guys can make it happen. You entangle the process much sooner, so that the cost of change goes down.
Yeah, and you could probably do it on an ongoing basis, like you said, throughout the whole thing, and actually derive a number of change management steps from the distributed
And the other thing I
ideation.
would do is I create entangled trios with one member of the IT group, a senior user and junior user, and have them working on the IT implementation and rollout and available for people to ask questions. So you'd only need about 10% of the workforce involved in the trios for everybody to know somebody in one of the trios, so they've got somebody to go to if they've got a problem. You do not want IT rollout for people going to one help desk to solve the problem. Yeah, you actually want the informal network of people they know who've found solutions to the problem or can find solutions to the problem involved. So I do a mixture of distributed idea, capture the unarticulated needs, and then use the trios to generate solutions to problems as they came. Now, if they haven't fully completed the design, they've got ambiguity, that becomes even more powerful. You can entangle it earlier. Yeah.
Okay. So, so that's the integrating part. And is there anything you would do on the side of, you know, what they want in the more the expectation of classical change management is, of course, you know, communication strategies, newsletters, stakeholder workshops,
Okay.
etc. and all
So
that.
let me move on to that now.
Okay.
Right? So I would do a mass narrative capture of what went wrong with previous systems and implementations. I wouldn't say what went wrong, but I know that's what I'll get. So either in our company or in other companies you work for, yeah, tell us the story that you wish you'd known at the time about the new system.
Oh, yeah.
And that actually tells you what people are scared of. Yeah, and it actually tells you what they'll have a negative response to very quickly. Yeah. So that's a way of testing where people's expectations are. Yeah. And within that, I would create the extreme positive and extreme negative scenarios around the new system. So a story about the past, get them to signify that, then in the end, say what is your fear about the new system, what is your hope of the new system. All right, and I just attach those to the previous signifiers I have for patterns. Because what you're then doing is executives, when they communicate the new system, can say, well, we don't want to achieve these, but we do want to achieve those. Now, how can you help us? Right, so that's a variation on more like this, feel like that. But your communication strategy now uses the stories of your workforce, not artificially generated stories by corporate comms. And there's actually, we got narrative templates, by the way. We talked about ritual descent yesterday. The work we're doing in Kazakhstan with Pan Canadian is to get 300 executives able to communicate the new direction of travel for the company by telling stories without PowerPoint. And the way we did it is we gave them a template, which is a 13132 template, and they basically found anecdotes from their own experience. They started to assemble in the template, we told and retold it, and we ended up with all the executives able to tell a story based on real experience and to modify it over time. And that's actually another of our change methods. Because the last thing you want is a single slide set with corporate comms on it. You want your executives trained to be able to say, well, do you remember when we did that? It didn't work, did it? So we're starting to do this. Yeah, you're trying to make that sort of resonance. So I would also look at that in the communication strategy. Yeah, so the hopes and fears stories become the communication of what the new system is about. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well,
Okay.
Little break, little air.
just here, if we're through with the case, we were saying two alternatives. One is a custom developed one is a standard. Would that anything add if there's a standard?
So just you can entangle it sooner.
Same thing.
Yeah.
So if they haven't completed the design yet, they've got options, capturing the unarticulated needs, gives them the early wins. Yeah, and one of the other things we're now recommending people do is often make changes to the current system to test the new idea. Yeah, or build a prototype system which people use in simulation before you commit resources. Right? Because the way what IT can do these days is so scary that you need to understand how people would use it before you commit to it.